Well, the rose on your pinstripes in tatters, and your suitcase has seen better days, and the old station wagon looks battered as it sits outside a roadside cafe. Time for you to believe in, time for you to go, and in the small chilly hours of the morning.
All right. Welcome to the 8th Note Sessions. I'm Davin Mullen.
And I'm Mike Shamil.
And today we are joined by a remarkable individual, man of many hats and many pursuits, Leigh Stoner. Leigh, thanks for joining us.
Hello, guys.
Hello, Leigh.
Beautiful. So to start off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
There's an old man in Galway who speaks an Irish so pure he's never been heard to say the same word twice. I was born in London, England. My family comes out of the Port of London. Thames River, Port of London workers, merchant sailors, stevedores, truck drivers. I started out at 15 unloading frozen Russian timber from Murmansk. And I went on to become a truck driver. So I did that. Somehow I went to college, got a university degree, and became a journalist. And in the course of my travels, I happened to meet a woman from Buffalo, New York, who was working in a bar in London. And she became my wife, and that's how I got to Buffalo.
Look
Wonderful.
at that.
Look at that.
Wonderful. Your travels have taken you, I don't know if you've been to every continent, but certainly...
I have, except Antarctica.
I was going to say.
What's stopping you from Antarctica?
Nobody offered me a ride.
Fair enough. You should see
I did
the
work
Uber
with a
Eats.
woman who had been to Antarctica.
Ah, that had to be cool.
Yeah.
And
Cool,
these,
as you could say.
Yes, very.
to say the least.
and these days you can be found in this beautiful manuscript museum.
Yes, indeed, the Karpeles Manuscript Library Museum.
It's a beautiful location.
It is indeed.
I realize I've been saying that wrong for like my entire life. I've been calling it the Karpeles Manuscript Museum. Like carpal tunnel.
Like carpal tunnel. Yeah. Karpeles, I believe, Central European.
Okay.
It sounds Greek to me, but there's quite a lot of them. They're a colourful family. One of them is now a Bitcoin millionaire.
Wow.
No kidding.
And back in the good old days of Eliot Ness and the Untouchables, one of them robbed a gold train. A Karpeles robbed a gold train. He was a gangster.
It's marvelous. Marvelous. So you can be found in this beautiful museum with its own colorful history and very often at Nietzsche's.
Yeah.
Sort of regaling audiences and charming audiences with older songs.
The traditional stuff. Yeah.
That's why I first saw you, and I was taken by the totality of your performance because for the viewers at home, if you can't tell, Leigh is a natural storyteller. I could hear you read the phone book kind of thing. And you would always sort of introduce these songs and just say a few words on the history and what they meant and kind of give probably an uneducated audience a bit of insight onto it. What drew you to traditional music?
My mother was a singer, so I grew up in a house where I considered it perfectly ordinary and natural for adults to burst into song.
Wait, you mean it's not? I feel like my daily life is like a musical.
I find many musicians come from musical families.
Go figure.
Go figure. And singing was compulsory at school. I mean, you had to do it whether you were any good at it or not. You were punished if you made up the words for yourself and didn't sing it properly. So I learned a lot of English traditional songs and sea shanties when I was in primary school. That's 5 to 11, age 5 to 11. And when I was a teenager, I got into blues, and particularly Chicago blues. And this is American folk music. I mean, this is working men describing their conditions. So it's the same thing. I like ballads. I like songs that tell stories.
What's a particularly favorite of yours? Of the ballad?
Oh God, that's like asking me how many pretty girls I've kissed.
That's impressive either way.
What's maybe instead of your favorite, because that is a tough question. What's one do you think that people would be well to do to look into, to learn about and hear?
Well, the interesting thing about when you get into songs that are like 300 years old is that you can sing them and people understand what happened. It's sort of nothing really changes. Most songs are to do with love and the loss of love or the absence of love. And this thing just repeats itself over the ages. So you can tell these stories over and over again and they still work.
It's kind of timelessness to them. It's interesting because in your travels as a journalist, you've seen some very visceral things, things which I think speak to the human experience in kind of complicated ways. So sometimes they're with your travels in Africa, for example, you describe things which I mean are frankly very unsettling. Sort of being in close proximity to a mass grave. You've had to interview people who have very recently suffered incredible trauma, but you've also had to write about the sort of mundanities of like business and finance. Do you find that the sort of timelessness and the continuity of music, this repetition of themes, is that a kind of sanctuary for you?
Music is very interesting. You find it all over the world, at all times, in all cultures. And what is the point of music? I heard a neurologist speaking on this subject, and she said that it's an established neurological fact that there's something about melody and in particular rhythm that the human physiology locks into, and it is capable of producing an exalted state, like a higher form of consciousness. It is, if you like, you can approach the divine through music. The early Christian church in its early days was very much all singing and all dancing. And then the Vatican decided that dancing was leading to fornication. So they introduced kneeling instead. I don't know about you guys, but I've always found kneeling to be a far more convenient position in which to fornicate instead.
Yes. Yeah, dancing, there's too much going on, really. Well, the intention was there, if not the desired effect, right? I mean, geez.
I could say things, but I'm just going to get myself in trouble.
You have freedom of expression in this country.
True, but not without consequence.
Not without consequence.
And I think that's a hard-learned lesson for a lot of people, unfortunately. We live in sort of remarkable times right now because things seem to be on the existential decline in some ways. Do you think that's true, though?
I don't really understand what you mean by existential decline.
Well, we have, the proliferation of drugs, of guns. The climate seems to be in kind of a downward spiral.
Seems to be. Definitely is.
And there you go. That's existential.
You mean a threat to existence?
To human existence. I think the Earth will still be
that's
here.
what you mean.
Yeah, the Earth will still be here. It'll be fine.
It's been in a mess ever since people started recording history. If you look... All right, look at the book of Exodus. We recently had a big biblical exhibit in here. And in the book of Exodus, which is the history of Moses leading the Jews out of Egypt into the Promised Land, what was then called Canaan. And Moses died before they reached the Promised Land, and they were led into Canaan by Joshua, who proceeded, on the orders of God, to launch a campaign of genocide and ethnic cleansing against anyone who didn't obey Jewish law, whether they were Jewish or not. If you happened to work on the Sabbath, you got stoned, whether you were Jewish or not. They sacked 6 cities, massacred everybody. This is the start of the record of the history of the Jews. I now understand that none of this has any archaeological backing. There is no archaeological evidence to support the existence of a large Jewish population inside Egypt. So somebody made that one up. Why would you make that up about yourself if you didn't do it? We massacre people. We kill children. Aren't we fun? But it's going on today. This is Palestine. And there are people who say that they have the right to live there because God gave them that land. And they're not displacing any Arabs. Even the Jews are divided now on the question of Zionism.
And to draw a clear distinction, because in the U.S. discussions of Judaism and Israel are often conflated. We're talking about Israel as a nation on the world scene, not specifically the faith of Judaism.
Right, it's a nationality, it's a religion, it's many, many different things that covers a very, very wide range of cultures, languages, and people.
It's interesting. In our pre-interview conversation, we were talking about the rise of Christian fascism.
Yeah.
Why is that something that seems to be sort of sneaking in through the back door here?
Peculiarly American.
Yeah.
I was surprised when I started to really get into America to discover that for such a technologically advanced nation, the church still holds a powerful sway over the political sphere. Europe now is mostly a secular society, and we don't have anything approaching these mega churches or these televangelists. But if you look back again at the history of this country, it wasn't just the Protestants who came over here. You also got all the Satanists and the weirdos and the witches.
Sure.
You have a Church of Satan in this country.
I do.
And sure.
And they're fighting for more rights than the Christian church. In some ways.
Yeah.
In some ways. It's kind of a weird situation.
Yeah, the rest of the world kind of looks at this and thinks, these Americans are crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's sort of and to be clear, the stances we're talking about with religion, politics, and all that, these aren't music as arts official endorsements. These are like Shamil, Devin Mullen, and Leigh Stoner as individuals speaking in that capacity. But the foundation of this country, I mean, to your point, Leigh, these were basically religious extremists who...
They were considered to be religious extremists.
At the time. And they weren't cogent with society in England. And
I was in Rotterdam once for Thanksgiving. The American ambassador got up and thanked the Dutch for all the hospitality that they'd given to the pilgrims who were in Holland before they sailed to England and came over the Atlantic. And the Dutch, I was informed afterwards by a Dutchman that those particular pilgrims were so unpopular in Rotterdam, they were considered to be so extreme in their views that the Dutch put them to sea in a leaky boat that was supposed to sink in the North Sea and drown. And they sealed the dock off that the ship sailed from because they didn't want them back again.
It's a difficult thing because part of, particularly with far right and the intersection between politics and faith in that way, it's very heavily reliant on a narrative of self-persecution.
Self-persecution?
Well, not self-persecution. Well, I mean, kind of. We're all sinners, and we can't.
Oh, you're talking about the Catholic faith.
Well, Catholicism, but also I'd say certain sects in the evangelical movement. It's very much an us versus them mentality. The world is against us. We are warriors of God, and we have to.
That stuff. Yeah, the Church of England. You don't get anything like having to go to confession at the age of 12 when they know that you've got dirty little secrets that you don't want to talk about, and making you confess to carnal desire. So no, we don't. The Church of England is very much Catholicism light. We get all the salvation, but none of the guilt.
None of
the shame, because there's a big difference between guilt and shame.
Yes.
Christianity is big on shame as a tool.
Yeah.
Reminded of that one scene from The Meaning of Life.
Yeah.
Monty Python. The intro of the movie. Whatever. I mean, if we're talking controversy, we might as well throw that in there. Why not?
So we've come full circle in a former church now manuscript museum. We've gone everywhere from journalism to religion back to Monty Python.
So I suppose we should talk about money next then, for breaking the social taboos.
Money?
Yeah, money.
How much you paying me for this?
Yeah, right. No, you're doing this for the privilege of the exposure. Whatever.
For the privilege of getting my face on a screen somewhere.
Yeah, right. You're going to be a star.
Just bring the feds back down on me, I tell you.
The part of your background is in post-World War II England.
Yeah, that's where I grew up.
You described it as, in sort of positive ways, as being socialist at the time, and that's very much.
It was very much an optimistic time because everyone had been. My family got bombed and rocketed for 5 years, so everyone had PTSD. There were an awful lot of fistfights amongst men. I mean, it was a very bangy place, but the feeling was things are getting better. I was born, there was food rationing and stuff like that, and that went out in the 60s, and suddenly people had money to spend. And the invention of the teenager in the 60s, someone who was living at home with their parents and going out to work and having a wage packet and money to spend on pop records and clothes and stuff like that. That was a new phenomenon. So
now we're kind of seeing a regression of that.
That's been going back since, in my experience, that really came to an end during the 70s. The swing to the left by the end of the 60s. In the 68, there were student riots in Paris and Munich, and there were student strikes. I don't think there was a riot, but there were certainly student strikes in England. And during the 70s, again, coal miners wanted to be paid as much as brain surgeons. It was a kind of everybody wanted more. And there were so many strikes. And then with the 80s, there was the swing to the right with Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. And it's been going towards the right ever since for the past 40 years. Generally, conditions, I think, for ordinary working people have gotten worse. And conditions for the ruling class have pretty much maintained themselves.
If not gotten better.
This is the thing. I mean, Prince Charles and that lot, their fathers, the men who raised them, ran the British Empire. But by the time Prince Charles finished Cambridge University, there wasn't an empire left to run. So Prince Charles and his buddies had to stay and run England. And in order to maintain their standard of living, they couldn't bleed the poor Indians or the poor Africans. So they bled the poor British proletariat.
And so it goes.
That's how it goes. The dominant class seeks to hang on to its position at all costs. The middle class seeks to either join the upper class or to overthrow it, and the working class just gets done.
Do you feel that political discourse in the States, not so much at the individual level, because I talk to people when I'm out, and they're much more freely speaking than you'll see in media or journalism.
Yeah,
but
sure.
What do you make of how fixed it is? How you won't hear the word proletariat. You won't hear anything regarding Karl Marx, or even the utterance of socialism is itself a pejorative term used to discredit candidates and movements.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
I don't even want to start on that one, quite frankly. No, I've got nothing useful to contribute on that. I really don't. It's a cultural thing, partly born out of the Cold War, with the Soviet bloc and that kind of totalitarian communism. Socialism for me consists of an agreement on the general level that able-bodied buggers like me, who are capable of looking after ourselves, were helped by the state when we were young. The state educated me. The state gave me free dental care. The state gave me free medical care. I used to get free milk at school. The state helped me to grow up, so in my earning years, it's right that I pay taxes to support the next generation and to support the preceding generation in their old age, because they helped me when I was young. Socialism is decent education, decent healthcare, decent housing. That's all. Enough to eat for everybody. If you're brighter and you want to make more for yourself, you can. But you'll pay taxes. And everyone seems to... Well, that's how most of the developed world lives now.
Do you feel like America is in a kind of knowledge bubble?
What do you mean by knowledge bubble?
I suppose I feel like we don't look outside our borders very often.
Let's face it, most Americans never leave the borders of America. You can go to Canada, you can go to Mexico, but if you want to go anywhere else, you've got to cross the Atlantic or the Pacific. Most people don't have either the time or the money to do that. And so you're not exposed to foreign cultures in the sense that you can get close enough to smell them. And to see, do they work? You only know what you see on a screen. So there is this insularity that America is the biggest and the most important country and the best country in the world. And it does lead to a lack of cultural relativism and the realization that there are other ways to live than this. You know, there are other ways of doing it.
What do you think might be, supposing one of our audience members wins the lottery or something, you know, and has a travel budget? Where do you think would be an instructive place to go and learn?
If you've got all the time and the money to travel, I suggest you the important thing is to go on your own. Yeah, if you travel with somebody else, you'll have a reference point. But if you travel alone, you don't have a reference point. You're naked out there, and you are forced to rely on the kindness of strangers, if you like.
Sure.
You know, and you will find it's a very life-reaffirming experience that pretty much everywhere you go, there are bad people, sure, but most people are good. Most people will help a stranger in need, and this is what people do. We are empathetic towards each other. Doesn't matter what we look like. You know, we feel the same, and most people are aware of this.
Beautiful. I think that's a great idea. Just get out there and really do the thing.
Yeah. So go and have an adventure. Anywhere. Don't go to Nigeria. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
He brought that up just in the pre-interview conversation.
I didn't mean that.
I brought up how he was on a virtual stream during the pandemic, during the lockdown portion of the pandemic, because the pandemic is obviously still here. Where he was at Nietzsche's performing on like a Facebook live stream, and the gentleman running it was asking him about some of his experiences traveling, and he had a song about traveling to Nigeria and an unfortunate experience that he had there. And that kind of leads me into the question I have to kind of intersect the two subjects of traveling and journalism and kind of come full circle a little bit for a moment. The traveling you've done, how has that influenced the way you approach your journalism when you're asking questions, when you're picking people's brains? How has that sort of mold your ability as a journalist?
Pretty much every writer that ever... Most writers get material from travel because it gives you a fresh perspective on the world as opposed to where you happen to live all the time and that's your day-to-day existence. So it provides you with new ideas, different music, different scents, different colours, just different people, different senses of humour. So, yeah, it really... There are the writers who sit at home and who never go out and who make it all up in their head. And I wasn't one of those. I basically got my material from other people in the real world. You don't have to make this stuff up.
Definitely a more accurate way to convey things. Because, I mean, it's very easy to imagine the way things are, but once you've kind of seen it for yourself, you know, you obviously have the tools to make a more complete picture.
What is known as getting down to the real nitty-gritty,
yeah.
I believe.
Now, how do you think that this sort of plays into your music? Because I want to now sort of segue into your music as an artist. Have you sort of taken that world view that you have and infused it into your music?
I wanted to write and to travel. I lacked the wherewithal, I lacked the means. I couldn't afford to travel, I had to have a job. So I had to find a job that somehow paid me for writing and traveling. And I found that writing about trains and ships and planes, got me rides on them, because you get close to whatever subject you write about. So that was the start of that, and that took me into places that I never thought that I would see, and into doing things that I never would have imagined if I just stayed at home and worked in the hardware store. So yeah, get out there, get on the road. The trains are hiring, you know, conductors.
There you go.
Be a train conductor.
There you go. That definitely would get you from place to place.
It gets you from place to place, and you meet travellers as well. And they're not like stay-at-homes, they have a different perspective.
When you're out traveling and you're talking to strangers, what's one of the things that you love asking them?
How do you say, "Fuck off, you Austrian wanker," in your language? Bozmeko Srečvos in Hungarian, Gami Sumalaka in Greek. It's Varfer queer on earth Bronler Autrichian in French. Or there are many.
That's awesome. I love personally picking people's brains. I'm the kind of guy that, like at the grocery store, if I make eye contact with someone for more than 3 seconds, I just start yammering to them.
That's one of the things that I like about Buffalo, is that strangers talk to each other.
Yeah.
And it's considered to be perfectly ordinary.
Yeah. I think we took a sort of a hit of that during the pandemic.
Londoners aren't like that.
No?
No. Stranger talks to me in London, what do you want?
Yeah, in Buffalo, that's always been one of the things that has always attracted me, because I started off in the city, moved to the burbs, and then moved around a bunch and came back to the city. And that was one of the things I really missed about this place is just, you can go anywhere and people just strike up conversations.
And I have the weirdest conversations with strangers. Yeah, it's fun. We like Buffalo.
Yeah, one time someone stopped me and they wanted to know when the next bus was coming, and they didn't have a phone to look it up.
Yeah.
And then it just got into this weird conversation where he thought I was related to Mark Zuckerberg, and I had to explain to him that I'm not. But I walked away laughing, going, that was a very Buffalo conversation.
Yeah, we get a lot of them in here. My favorite was the guy who came in and he wanted to tell me about, did I know the Queen of England has a unicorn in her flower garden?
Did he mean like a statue or a real living one?
No, a real live unicorn. I thought, okay, now is the time to start moving you out onto the porch. Well, thank you for coming in. We had another one in this morning. I don't know what the hell he was raving on about. Eccentrics.
He probably saw the unicorn and, just everything unraveled at that point.
Oh, no, he was George Washington's grandson or something like that.
Oh, sure.
We've got a picture of George Washington and his wife on the wall over there, and he wanted to take a photograph of it.
Speaking of the things around the museum, what brought you to working at Karpeles?
Quite simply, I needed a job. And I knew I had met Chris Kelly, who is the director, because he's very active on the local music scene with other bands and things like that. And I first came here about 16 or 17 years ago and stayed for a while and moved on because I needed to do other things, and now I've been back here since September. And I have no plans to go anywhere right now, but you never can tell.
Yeah. And if someone who's not familiar with the museum, and also shout out to the museum for hosting us today, what can they find here? I mean, it's a manuscript museum, so of course there's going to be documents, but what makes that so special and different from another museum?
Rare manuscripts are a part of the art market. Quite simply, these documents are the bare bones of history. This is where historians get their information from. It is an academic thing. It's not of interest to everybody. It has to be a minority interest, I will admit. But effectively, People buy and sell this stuff at auction.
Wow.
It's worth money the same way that oil paintings are worth money. I'll give you an example. Karpeles has, in the collection in California, a copy of the United States Constitution.
Wow.
Now, another copy of that, I don't know how many copies there are, sold at Sotheby's Auction House in Manhattan last October for $42 million.
Wow.
The same document previously was auctioned at Sotheby's in the mid-'80s when it was valued in the 800,000 bracket. So there's an increment of $41 million over 35 years for doing nothing, apart from keeping a bunch of old paperwork in a drawer somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
So could I take like some of my first grade like writing homework that's still in like the desk in my parents' basement? Do you think I could put that on auction on like eBay or something and sell that for something?
Not right now.
Do I have to wait till I'm retiring?
I've told the boss after this interview I'm going to be famous and I'm going to sell him my old notebooks.
Beautiful.
Well, if there's some lyrics in there, I might be buying them.
There are lyrics in there, sure.
This notepad with a coffee stand on it.
All that
Leigh
stuff,
Stoner.
right? The Bob Dylan's notebooks are worth money.
Yeah.
Mine aren't because I'm not a famous musician.
See, this is where Leigh Stoner spilled coffee in Munich on his notebook while he was writing about how crappy his train ride was.
Well,
I was in Munich Easter '68 for the riots. I was 17 years old. It was very exciting. Water cannon out all over the place. Somebody got killed. Yeah.
What brought you there for that moment? Just to kind of like pick on that for a second.
I had family in Germany. I had an uncle in the British Army of Occupation who went over there and married a German girl. And I was studying German at school. So I got over there and basically by hanging out with my cousin Barbara, who's my age, I learned how to speak good street German.
Nice.
And how to say "fuck off, you Austrian wanker" in German. Hau ab, Österreicher, fixe.
I see there's a trend in your family of traveling and marrying women from outside of the country and following them to their home.
usually we ask for advice, not for me personally. I'm beyond help, but for young folks who are coming up today and are, I don't know, presented with all this. Do you have any just words of advice or encouragement or anything?
Yeah, essentially you can't do anything about it, so don't worry about it. These are geopolitical forces. You cannot escape. If something goes off and you're there, I'm sorry, you cannot run away. So what you have to do is to concentrate on the small picture, which is that tiny piece of the world that you have an influence over here today. And all you can do is try and make things better for the people who are around you, and not worse. If you can make somebody smile, you've done a good thing, because you've boosted their immune system.
I've heard that.
Yeah. Laughter is even better. Stimulates the thymus.
Well, we get a lot of that on this show.
Yeah. Do you know about the Bombay Laughter Club?
No.
There's this bunch of geezers in Bombay. And they practice a form of hatha yoga. Hatha is breathing. Hatha, it's the inhalation and the exhalation. Hatha. And what they do is that they stroll down to the beach and they go, hoo, 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 hoo. And they do that in chanting. And at the end of it they say, we are the happiest people in the world because we are the healthiest people in the world because we are members of the Bombay Laughter Club.
I love that.
Yeah. You can
Sounds
see
like a
they're
fun
on
club.
YouTube. You should catch them. Laughter is infectious.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing to get infected with.
And it's a good thing to get infected with.
There are not many
Right,
good things, but
right.
that is one of them.
That is one good thing. Yeah.
Beautiful.
All right, and the last thing I have is for folks like us, like Devin and I, who and other podcasters out there, because I know a lot of the podcasters in Buffalo have been kind of slowly forming a community. What are ways we can be better in terms of like a service to our neighbors and the public with our shows?
Quite frankly, I'm in no position to give the podcasting community any advice whatsoever, since I know absolutely nothing about it.
That's fair.
This is a new media that your generation is well, other people are, particularly your generation. This is new technology. You'll do with it what you will. Who knows? You might start a revolution. Preferably not around me.
This is the Leigh Stoner cult.
And with that, I'm Devin Mullen.
I'm Mike Shamil.
Our guest today has been Leigh Stoner, remarkable man, and this is the Eighth Note Sessions. We'll catch you next time.
Well, those lines in your face are getting stronger. Those bristles are definitely grey. And if you linger in this place any longer, somebody just might make you stay. It's time for you to be leaving. Time for you to go. And in the small chilly hours of the morning, you will sleep by the side of the road. And in the small chilly hours of the morning,